Hey everyone, we have a sponsor for this episode. It's the Heirloom Roses Company. The growing season is too short to waste on mediocre plants, which is why Heirloom Roses only produces robust, healthy, own root roses, the way they were meant to grow. Grafted roses from big box stores are susceptible to winter damage and risk being overtaken by rootstock suckers. But not own root roses. Own root roses will outlive and outshine grafted roses, resulting in stronger disease resistance, a longer lifespan, and stunning blooms that are always true to variety. Heirloom Roses wants you to invest in your garden and enjoy their superior disease-resistant roses backed by a 1-year guarantee. With over 900 varieties to choose from, they have every rose you could want at heirloomroses.com. And June is the perfect time to plant. Take 20% off your order of roses with code NERD20, that's NERD20, now through October 31st, 2024. Let's make the world beautiful, one rose at a time, and find your next rose at heirloomroses.com. And don't forget to use the code NERD20 at checkout for 20% off your order. Now, on with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Gardenerd Tip of the Week podcast, where experts from around the world talk shop, share stories, and offer their favorite tip. I'm your host, Christy Wilhelmi. This week, my guest is Angela Judd, a certified master gardener and mother of 5. Angela shares gardening tips through her YouTube channel with nearly 250,000 subscribers, her blog, online classes, and her book, How to Grow Your Own Food, an illustrated beginner's guide to container gardening. She joins us today from her home in Arizona. Thanks for being here, Angela.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited to talk with you. You're in Arizona, which automatically makes you a rock star when it comes to gardening in difficult conditions. So tell us a little bit about your homestead and where you're located.
You bet. Arizona gardening is definitely different and challenging, but I love it here. We can garden year round. You don't have to, but you can garden year round. So we're a desert, as you would imagine. We don't get a lot of water and we do get high heat, but we have beautiful, mild winters that we're able to grow a lot of those cool season crops during our winters. So it's really a fabulous time to garden. And I can pick something every day of the year from my garden. So no complaints, even though there are some challenges. I live in an HOA lot in Mesa, Arizona, less than a third of an acre. And I have I have in-ground garden areas, containers, about 20 raised beds, lots of fruit trees.
20 raised beds.
20, I know. It's a lot. It is a lot to keep up with, but I love it. I really do love it. We've got lots of citrus, pomegranates, peaches, plums, lots of fruit trees growing too. So lots growing.
It sounds amazing. And what are you growing this time of year? What's coming in? Is anything coming in from the garden right now, I guess is what I should ask.
Well, the beginning of June is when we're harvesting all of those spring warm season crops that love our springs, the beans and cucumbers and squash and, peaches and all of those things. But they kind of finish up as our temperatures start to heat up. And we're in that transition now where the hot season crops are planted, but we're enjoying the abundance of warm season crops right now. So lots of tomatoes, all that warm season crops. This is the time where we get to harvest those because our season starts kind of pretty early in the spring.
Got it. Yeah, that's sort of similar to here in Los Angeles, although we have our typical June bloom, but we've had May gray and then we had grape roll before that. So it's been just totally socked in. And I only put in my tomatoes toward the end of May. So it's kind of late this year, very late this year, but I'm glad to hear that something's going. Now I noticed also that you're sitting next to some grow lights. And what do you have started under there?
So I've got some more like hot season crops that are getting ready. I'm experimenting with, I think I have 8 different varieties of basil that I have growing there. I've grown a lot of different varieties, but these are kind of 8 new to me varieties that I hadn't tried before. So I'm excited about those. Basil loves our heat. They don't all love sunlight, but they definitely can tolerate our heat. I've got zinnias going, and then I have 4 three or four new to me heat-loving greens varieties that I'm trying out that have been recommended to me.
Oh,
So
cool.
I'm always trying, if someone says, hey, this grows well in the heat, I'm always game to give it a try and see how it does. So that's what I'm doing right now, giving them, I'm starting some outside and starting some indoors to kind of experiment with which way grows best. And then I love to just share what I've learned.
Excellent. Well, we're going to come back to this because I want to
Yeah.
talk varieties more specifically. But first, I just want to learn a little bit more about you because we haven't met before. And were you always gardening, or did this sort of weave into your life later on?
So I have liked to garden. I remember my earliest memories are of gardening, with my grandma. I think that's pretty typical. My grandparents in Indiana had a huge garden. My great grandpa was a beekeeper, lots of history there, but we lived, we didn't live there. So I didn't grow up with that, but we would visit them. And I had 5 kids. I have 5 kids, and so I was busy raising my family. And when we moved here to Arizona in 2008, finally had a yard big enough to have a garden, and still had my kids around. But I started gardening and just really loved it and got more and more into it, and was yeah, just kind of grew from there, really.
Yeah, as it does, it becomes an obsession, especially with 20 raised beds. Woohoo!
Yeah, they did start. I started with, I started by reading, the Square Foot Gardening book,
Mhm.
Mel Bartholomew. I added, a couple of raised beds and had success, but had questions and struggled because of the heat. It was hard. I didn't always know where to find the answers. And I think that's what drives me now, is that early gardener me that didn't know what to do. I'm really trying to help that person here be successful. And yeah, I just kept adding from there. I think I'm done adding, but never say never.
I know. I keep taking over other spaces in the yard. Like, well, maybe that'll work.
Yeah.
And you just keep expanding until you've hit the wall, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what. Now, I read your book, How to Grow Your Own Food, back in 2021, and it's a beginner's guide to growing in containers. Aside from growing, well, container gardening is just challenging in general, I think, for a lot of people, but especially so for folks in hot, dry summers. So, how do
Mhm.
you manage plants in containers in your garden during the hottest time of the year?
So my best advice is to put the small containers away during the summer. I say, you know what? It's too hot to garden in those during the summer. So garden all the rest of the year in whatever size container you want, but when it gets hot, put those small ones away and then get them out again in the fall. That's probably my biggest tip. There are things you can do because, and the reason I still garden in containers is because I want to actually, does this really work? Can you garden in grow bags through an Arizona summer? So I still have a lot of grow bags and containers,
Mhm.
but there are things you can do, the size of container, make it as large as possible. Make sure you're filling it all the way up with soil. Group your containers together. Choose a location that gets sunlight or shade naturally. Choose those cool spots in your yard. Add things like oyas to your containers during the summer that can help water, that it's going to give those plants access all day long to water in the soil instead of, it can be dry by 10 o'clock here
Yeah,
because it's
right.
so hot and dry. So there are things you can do to help, garden during the heat. And then I would say the rest of the year, whatever container you want to garden in, it's just a joy because it's nice weather. Choose those sunny, you can put it in a sunny spot, and we have a lot more options.
I think I want to just get a little more specific about containers in general, the small containers by that size, because a lot of people, when they first start gardening, they get these cute little containers that are adorable but impractical. And so when I think of containers, I'm always encouraging people to start with a certain size. What would you say is for your area the best size or bigger to work with?
I would say no smaller than, like, a 5-gallon bucket is about the smallest size that you can grow vegetables in well. Flowers, you can get away with a little bit smaller herbs too. But a 5-gallon bucket, it's amazing the number of crops you can grow well in that, especially because they have that nice depth. So I would say about that size or larger is if you want to have success, is a good place to start.
Yeah, I think so. And how do the grow bags perform? Because they're so porous and breathable. Do they dry out super, super quickly?
They do dry out, but I have found that grouping them together, it kind of makes it like a big raised bed. When you've got several grow bags grouped together, they're, insulating one another. They're keeping that moisture in. There's not as much of the bag exposed to air and sunlight. And so that can be a really effective way to use grow bags, is just to group them together.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great idea. This may be a redundant question because you've already given us some great advice on that. Do you have any tips, though, to start people off on the right foot when growing edible crops in containers?
That's a good question. I would say grow things that you like to eat so that you are excited about growing it. And then also just grow what grows well in your climate. Really lean into, I'll talk about that more, I'm sure, as we go along, but lean into, planting at the right time, because they're cool season crops and warm season crops, and you're going to be more successful if you're planting at the right time. So figure out the best time for whatever it is that you want to grow, or what is the best thing to plant right now, and plant them. And don't be afraid if you're just starting, don't be afraid to buy transplants for some crops. It's not cheating. But then also don't be afraid to start from seed, because there are some crops that you're going to have so much success with when you start from seed. Things like beans and peas grow so well from seed. So don't be intimidated by those, but don't feel like you have to start tomatoes from seed to be a gardener either.
Right. Yeah. I think I always said there's no shame in starting from transplants. It's
No,
perfectly all right.
just learn a little bit. The other thing I would say was just learn about the crops you want to grow. Do they do best started from seed or transplant? And then go that direction.
Yeah. Now you've segued me nicely into my next question because I want to ask you about your planting calendars, which you offer on your website. Most gardening books are, not correct for where I live in Southern California, and they're definitely not right for Mesa, Arizona. So, what do your planting calendars offer folks who live in dry climates?
Well, for me, as I got started, timing was the biggest challenge. And I wasn't exactly sure, when to plant, because our climates here our seasons here are so different. Like I said, we can grow almost anything, but we have to plant it at the right time. And so for me, knowing when to plant and figuring out when to plant solved a lot of my issues, made a lot of things easier, because plants were happier, they're not stressed. And when they're not stressed, there's less pests, less diseases. And so as I learned more about the planting times, I wanted to make that information easily accessible and help people know about, do I plant this from seed or transplant? When do I start this indoors? All of that information in a really easy to digest format, where they can just either go buy vegetable and look the whole year, or the planting calendars. Okay, what can I plant this month? What seeds can I start indoors? Just make it really easy and accessible for people so they can be successful.
And so, what does that look like where you live? What's your timing?
So our timing is, we have um, a warm season, we, like I discussed, in spring. And how long that is different every year. And so that length will determine how well our warm season crops do. And then we have our hot season, which can begin in May. It can
Mm,
begin a little earlier, and it definitely goes through September, at beginning of October, where it's really hot. And sometimes we get hopefully we get a monsoon. We're just in the top section of getting some monsoon moisture. So then that is the beginning, if we get that monsoon moisture, of our second warm season. So we have this additional kind of warm season where we will do a second planting of squash and tomatoes and, green beans, those warm season crops, through the fall. And then we have our cool season, which is typically October-ish. We want it to be October 1st, but it's usually Halloween,
right.
um, through through the winter, and that's when we grow a lot of our cool season crops.
Yeah.
So
And that's very similar to here, Southern California. We do our cool stuff through the fall,
Mhm.
and then in spring we start putting in tomatoes and peppers and all that stuff. And I call it the dead zone. The that time during the summer when it's too hot to grow anything, or really too hot for things to do well. It's really,
Mhm.
I mean, I think if you manipulate your scenario, your conditions enough, you can grow anything whenever. But I think to make it easier for people, it's just better to grow those things in the seasonality, like you said,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I mean, when it's 115 degrees outside, you really can't grow just anything. There's
Yeah.
very few. We've got our handful of heat-loving crops that's what we lean into. Encourage cover crops. There's hot season cover crops that cover that soil and keep that soil alive so it's not just frying in the sun. And then we're, trying to plant in the fall, and then we have this dead soil that has, so keeping the soil alive over the summer, whether that's by actively gardening or just using cover crops, which is a lot of what I encourage because it is pretty hot.
Yeah.
But there are crops if you want to harvest, long beans, Asian beans, cantaloupe, sweet potatoes. There's a lot of things that will grow and thrive in the heat. So,
Do you have a favorite cover crop that you like to grow?
I really like black-eyed peas or even sweet potatoes as a cover
Right.
crop.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah,
That's
that
great.
covers the soil, lots of vines, and it'll just take off and really not a lot of maintenance.
I want to go back a little bit to some of the heat tolerant varieties you are testing out, because a lot of people ask me for that. And I honestly just have my tried and true favorites. So if you have any favorites that do well, or these new varieties that you're growing, share those with the audience.
Absolutely. Like I have my short list of heat-loving crops. I just posted a video all about, the heat-loving crops that I was planting. And what I love about the gardening community is there are so many people who have other experiences and they bring something else. And, a lot of commenters were like, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried this? And I said, no, but I'm writing it down and ordering the seeds. And so that's where this next crop of heat loving greens is coming from. A few of these, Malabar spinach is one that grows well through the heat. And that's one I've done. Egyptian spinach, I've grown a little bit, but haven't really figured out all of used it a lot and things like that. So the ones that I'm growing, I have to peek under the grow light here. So I have Molokai Egyptian spinach, New Zealand spinach, and perpetual spinach. Those are the ones that I am starting from seed indoors. I'm also going to experiment with starting outdoors, but it's so hot right now. Sometimes the seeds get tricky, but that's what I'm going to just, practice with those, see how we like them. Do we eat them? Or are they just more of a cover crop? Or, how well do they do? And we'll see.
Nice. And I wanted to go back to your basil varieties. What
Sure.
are you trying out this year?
So there is one, and I'm probably saying it wrong, but Mirhani, Mrihani, Mirhani basil.
Interesting. I've never
Yeah,
heard of
I
that.
hadn't either. I've got one outside, and the leaves look a little bit serrated so far. So if it's the right seed that popped up, there's some blue spice basil, some African nunum, Nunum basil, and Kapoor Tulsi basil. And then also, I have grown this before, this purple ball basil. It's a darling. It's this cute little small leafed purple basil that just keeps manageable. And then also, kind of the opposite of that is a lettuce leaf basil, which I've grown before, but gave it a little too much sunlight. This is a type that really is going to want a shady spot in your yard. So I'm starting more of that. And then my standby that I just love is the Emerald Towers basil because it's just this beautiful, tall, compact plant. I'm a square foot gardener, so anything that will stay in its square, I think is brilliant. So anyway, that's another one that and boxwood. So a few basil varieties in here that just always, like I say, leaning into the crops that grow well and growing as many different varieties as I can to really kind of test the boundaries of that crop.
Those all sound fun. I'm gonna have to check them out. I love salad leaf basil. It's one that I never have a garden without it. It's fantastic. And lettuce leaf, fabulous. But I haven't heard of many of these others, so I'm gonna check them out.
Again, a lot of these recommendations will come to me from other gardeners in hot climates, maybe not Arizona, but all over the world, there are other gardeners that share the same challenges that we experience here in the low desert. And I love the tips that they share with me and what I can learn from them. It's really the online gardening community, I feel like, has enabled so much sharing and learning because there's not one right way to do anything. And so much of gardening is specific climate related. And within the United States, there's so many different, climates that what works for one may not work for another, but yet in other parts of the world, there may be something more similar to what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I agree. And I find that that's true. There's even the university ag websites are catering to northern climates
Mhm.
more than ours. So we're out there fending for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I tell people too, like, the seed packet has a lot of good information, read this, but that little calendar on the back, don't pay
Probably not for
attention
you.
to that. It's not for you. Or
Yep.
if a plant label says full sun, yeah.
Maybe not. So yeah, that brings me to another question I had. Do you use shade cloth over your plants at all?
So a few different ways I provide shade. So it's really maximizing the microclimates that you already have going on, figuring out where can I get shade naturally because that is going to be the ideal spot. That morning sunlight, afternoon shade, is gonna be the best. But then also providing shade. So yeah, I have a quite a large shade cloth over several of my beds that shades them, and also using other plants. Planting sunflowers on that western exposure on some of those beds. On the outside of the beds to provide some shade, even just some cooling brings pollinators. There are a lot of ways to provide shade, and you really just have to get creative with what you do. And then at the end of the day, you go outside sometimes in the middle of the summer and you're like, are you kidding me? This is so hot. It's so hard.
Yeah.
And I tell people it's like if I went somewhere, Michigan or, some cold place, their garden is not going to look the best in the middle of winter. And that's what the middle of summer is for us desert gardeners. It's just not going to look its best. Plants are going to struggle. It's things are going to die, plants will be stressed, and we just do our best and learn what we can from the successes, but mostly the failures. That's where you learn and, figure it out.
Yeah. There was a time when, well, Garden Com, which we both belong to, I believe, they hosted, well, Los Angeles hosted the conference one year and they scheduled it in August. I was like, this is the worst time. Come in October or November. It'll be so much better.
Or May or,
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
anything but now, anything but August. So, it's just there's a learning curve, and that's just how it goes.
But a lot of other gardens, I had the opportunity. I had my daughter and her husband both just finished law school back in Omaha, Nebraska. So we've been out visiting them several times, and beautiful garden out there that I've been to usually in the fall. And it's always gorgeous. I'm coming from this hot climate and I'm looking at this garden, just kind of jealous about, oh, this looks really good. But we were just out there for graduation. And so we went to the garden again, and it didn't look that good yet. It really, nothing had kind of grown into itself. The bulbs were done and everything else was
Yeah.
not looking that great. And it was really good for me to see that and realize, okay, it takes a while for it to grow into that. And it's okay. Our garden doesn't always look like that. And um, I lost a little bit of, I don't know if jealous is the right word, but sometimes you feel like other gardeners have it easier. But I think we all just have different challenges, and we have to learn how to maximize our benefits and then work within those challenges to be successful. So every garden has different challenges.
Agreed. Well, It is tip time. Do you have
Oh,
a
yeah,
favorite tip you'd like to share with the Garden Nerd audience?
absolutely. Find a planting guide meant for your area. Lean into the experience of other gardeners. The extension office is a great place to start. If it's, in your county, find a planting guide and that will help you be successful.
Yeah, it makes all the difference in the world, as we've just discussed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
You're
Angela,
welcome.
for that expert tip and for being a guest on the Garden Nerd Tip of the Week podcast. Where can people find you online?
Sure. It's Growing in the Garden on my blog, YouTube, like you said, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. That's where you'll find me. I really do try and teach. That's my goal. I'm trying to teach and educate, and that's what I love to do. I love teaching other people how to garden and to find success, and that's where I do it, longer form and short form videos, and then the blog posts and things. So
And you do it so well.
thank you.
All right, garden nerds, you'll find a link to Angela's book this week on gardenerd.com. We'll also link to her website, her gardening academy, and video channels so you too can be the one of hundreds of thousands of people who follow her. That's it for this week. Subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. Visit us for tons of free gardening information at gardenerd.com. Special thanks to our sponsor, Heirloom Roses, for supporting this episode. You'll find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter under Garden Nerd One, on Facebook as gardenerd.com, and of course, our Garden Nerd YouTube channel. Happy gardening.